Hello and welcome to the Scholar Progenium. Today we've got another exciting bolt action video for you. Once again, Warlord have blown our minds with the latest intelligence report for version 3. So yes, gentlemen, Warlord Games have dropped the fourth intelligence report. This one focusing on special rules. Now, I don't think this one's been as excitedly anticipated as maybe some of the other reports, such as the shooting rules, the MMG rules, so on and so forth. But this one, we're back to asking a lot of questions. This one poses a lot of questions, and there's a lot of devil in the detail here. It's big on the surface, and then the more you think about it, the crazier it gets. So I'm not going to waffle on for ages. We'll dive straight in and look at the rules that we have, and then we'll go through and discuss that all-important devil in the detail, and then we'll finish up with some comments from you guys, as is tradition. So they start off by saying that there's a lot of rules that needed clarifying, and they want definitive versions of special rules that are just shared by multiple units instead of different versions of Mountaineers having different versions of Fieldcraft and so on and so forth. Now, they're split into broadly three categories: unit special rules, weapon special rules, and we've got some very interesting examples which we'll talk about in a second. And then we've also got special rules that affect the table or game itself, which are entirely optional. And we on the channel are extremely excited about that because it's just going to allow us to do so many variety of battle reports. You guys know, long-time viewers know that we have our traditional Sunday bolt action battle report that we put out every single week for you guys. If you're not subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on all of our version 3 content that we're bringing out, because if you haven't already heard, guys, we're going to be doing a version 3 celebration week where we bring out battle reports and content every day, 7 days in a row from the first day of version 3. We're going to have battle reports ready on the first day for you guys. And big shout out to Warlord for sorting us out with the rules in advance, so that we can get those filmed up for you. And let me be very clear, I do not have the rules yet. I do not have the rules yet. I do not know when I'm going to get the rules. I just know, and I've got an NDA, so I can't talk about anything, but we're going to have content for you guys on the first day, let's put it that way. And it's going to be very, very exciting. Now, that's all I can say. Now, let's get straight into the rules. That is enough waffle from me. Now, they're saying that the unit and weapon rules are not exhaustive. They're going to have still some special rules in there, so it's a little bit paradoxical. Some units are going to need those special rules. They're not going to make it oversimplified, but I hope that they draw the line in a reasonable manner. And at this point, with the way version 3 is looking so far, totally trusting Warlord to make the right call there. We do need some intricacy. We don't want every unit that's vaguely similar to share the exact same characteristics. But at the same time, we don't want every single unit to have different characteristics. So it looks like they've made it clear here that they are aware of drawing a balance there, and they have aimed to draw a balance there, and we'll just have to see how that plays out. So, some shared rules, some unit-specific rules, that's what we know. Now, engineers is the first rule, and we've had this revealed already, so this is not the biggest deal, but it has given me some time to think, and we're going to discuss it more when we get onto the deep dive section. But essentially, units of engineers are equipped with explosives and other specialised gear for destroying battlefield fortifications and defences. To represent this, when a unit of engineers assaults a building, the defenders cannot benefit from the defensive position bonus. And in addition, engineers have several advantages when it comes to the rules for minefields and other fortifications, which will probably be some of those optional special rules. Now, when we saw this 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point, initially, it didn't seem like that big a deal. Yeah, they ignored the defense position. We know what that is. But now, we've seen that a big part of Warlord's ethos for version 3 is bringing outlier rules into the fold. What do I mean by this? Rules that people don't often use. We don't use smoke. No one bothers using it. It's a waste of time. People avoid buildings like the plague because of the prevalence of HE, just making them a death trap a lot of the time. You might hide behind a building, but very few people are crazy enough to get in one if there's any HE that can target it. There's other rules out there. We've looked at how they've brought machine guns into the fold. They've done the version 3 platoon selector so you can play with whatever you like, and all units and or unit combinations that you can think of are in some way looking very viable. And we've play tested a fair few unit combinations now, and they're all looking really fun and powerful in their own way. So why would buildings be any different? I feel strongly at this point that I can make a strong speculation, one might say. I feel quite confident that buildings are going to get a total overhaul to make them very, very good and usable and viable and a point to them. And with that, that makes engineers really powerful if they can reduce some of these new benefits that I'm predicting will come into play with buildings. And I'll back my point up with a second bit of evidence, which is they've specifically said that engineer platoon selectors can only be fielded, these dangerous units, you can only field them within their own formations rather than making your entire army out of them. So they've explicitly put into the rules, they've built into ways to restrict people from just spamming engineers, which means they're obviously really, really good, because they've not done that with vehicles. They've not done that with field guns. Really, I mean, they have done it with field guns, they have done it with MGs, but they haven't done it with vehicles. So you don't need to take any extra infantry, you don't need to take any extra officers to take vehicles. And these engineers, you have that restriction. You have to take them in a separate platoon. If you want loads of them, you might have to take 2 platoons. They're the only way to get flamers. So these engineer platoons are looking very powerful. Now this asks some more questions. Minor factions have been looking really good. We've had a lot of discussion in the comments, in the battle reports we've been doing, in these intelligence briefings that we've been doing. A lot of comments and a lot of discussion about how having access to so many of the basics as a minor faction makes you now eminently more viable than you would have been before. Think about it this way. When you could only take 1 bazooka as a partisan, but you didn't have access to any of the tanks and only light anti-tank guns as your other option, you only really had a couple of very weak anti-tank options available to you, or just not enough okay ones, functional ones. Whereas now, yeah, you don't get tanks, but you can take as many rocket launchers as you want. You can take as many light anti-tank guns as you want. And we're going to get into that in more detail in a second. But this is one step back for minor factions potentially, because maybe they don't have all of the units that will have they don't explicitly have maybe engineering squads. So this is a unit special rule. Also, you can't take flamethrowers without taking a couple of squads with the engineer special rule. So it's making me think that the engineer special rule will be given to units who aren't just engineers, if that makes sense. It's going to be given to units, and yeah, they'll have the engineer special rule, but it'll represent something completely different. Because otherwise, say the Finns, for example, they just can't take flamethrowers anymore. It's just not available to them because they can't take the engineer squads to get the flamethrowers on their own. And they can't get flamethrowers in the non-existent engineer squads, of course. So it's just a question that comes to mind. Not a big deal, just a question that comes to mind. I have a couple of minor factions. I know we have a lot of followers and subscribers who play minor factions, so sure, that's something that comes to mind for all of us. Right, we'll go into And another reason why I mention this is because they say in the article it represents a combination of training and equipment. So it's a rule reflective of a unit's ability to do certain things. Now, but I don't know what partisan unit's going to be particularly good at clearing minefields, let's put it that way. So it's one of those. We've seen the engineer rule before. I'm not going to go into a massive amount of detail on it, but I do have a couple more points to make when we get onto the discussion section. The next rule, however, is massive. It is huge, believe me, and that is fieldcraft. Wow, this is powerful. I'll read it out straight up. It's so simple. These units are rigorously trained and equipped for traversing different types of difficult terrain, and therefore treat rough ground as open ground instead. Movement, like not suffering from movement restrictions, is huge. If you guys haven't seen my Scholar versus Bow challenge, where me and JP, in preparation for the Warlord GT, we flew over to Denmark and trained with Bo Mortensen and the Danish national team for a weekend. One of the most incredible gaming experiences of my entire life. I'll be eternally grateful for Bo. You know, let me tell you, if you think he's a good bolt action player, he's an even better chef. He fed us, watered us all weekend, hosting his own home. What a legend. And go check his channel out right now if you haven't already. But yes, the big takeaway, something we mentioned on the live stream that weekend, was positioning. The ability to get optimal positioning more easily, therefore, by having, being able to move through rough ground unrestricted is huge. It means you're always in the right position. It means you can set up firing lanes more easily. It means you don't end up with some units lagging behind, because a couple of units can dash up through light woodland, but one's stuck marching through heavy woodland. So you can keep your units together in however way you want. You can reinforce your lines. If your left flank starts to buckle, you can bring units from your centre over there much more quickly. It's not like, there's a big forest in the way, it's going to take me 2-3 turns to get over there, I'm screwed. They're just going to wipe that force out and I'll have to sort of reposition to defend the centre. I've got to accept those losses. No, it's massive, okay? And I can tell you this also from a beginning of the game standpoint. I run partisans, as a lot of you guys know, and therefore this is the partisans' national rule, but they only get it for the first turn in version 2 because it is so powerful. Let me tell you, running a squad of cavalry 18 inches up the board, regardless of any ruins that are in the way, regardless of any forest or rough ground, any obstacles, anything like that, you just hop straight over. It's massive. You can just the shenanigans you can pull is big. Now, the reason I'm gonna actually say that I really like this, and I think this is actually playing into and giving me a much clearer sense of something which I kind of got a taste for in our last version 2.5 playtest battle report, which is when me and Sam were playing, and this has been the case in the other battle reports, but sort of increasingly so the more we've played, the action kicks off from turn 1. There's no longer, turn 1 you exchange a couple of pins, one infantryman dies, a mortar gets a lucky hit maybe, but essentially casualties are very low and it's the pin game. And then second turn, it warms up a little bit depending on how aggressive the players are. Maybe you'll get some proper action there, but a lot of the time, again, just an increase in the scale of the exchange of pins and a couple more casualties, a couple of lucky hits causing, some damage here and there. And then it really kicks off from turn 3. That's when the battle really begins. And that's been the case. That was really the case in version 1, less so in version 2. And now in version 3, I feel like it's just going to be bang. Turn 1, action commences. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do cool positioning. In fact, this rule is going to play into that. You've got your action turn 1, but you still want to be tactical. You still want to be strategic. You don't want to take away from that element of the game, because it's a really important and fun element of the game that has a lot of tactical mastery to it. You can get really good at that kind of thing. And therefore, if things are going to kick off, we can hit things a lot easier. We can hit things from a lot further away, a lot more consistently. And we're going to see more of that in a second, believe me. So, Fieldcraft, extremely powerful. And we'll dive more into it. I've got more points to talk about it, but I know some of you just want to hear these rules. So I'll stop, speaking the obvious right now, and we'll get onto the third rule. And this one is a massive surprise. My mind is blown once again. I did not see this coming whatsoever. And that is the special rule for anti-tank guns. And I'll read it out to you now. And there is some serious devil in the detail here. We've got a lot to discuss on this. So, anti-tank guns are designed to accurately target vehicles through improved sights. All anti-tank guns from light to super heavy, including those mounted on vehicles, which is massive, they get an additional +1 modifier to hit vehicles when shooting with a fire order, and this includes ambush and reaction fire. So if you want to charge down, if you want to tank shock a field gun, which is totally doable in 2nd edition, actually automatically destroys the field gun. In this, it's a big risk, because if they get that shot off, it's going to be on a 3-up. Now, this is absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. I have just 2 pages of notes written on this, so I'm going to try not to forget anything. Me and JP had an in-depth discussion on the phone within about 5 minutes of this dropping on our lunch times. So, and I'm totally forgetting again about my models once again, but let's take a look at anti-tank gun second. Let me move this guy to the side. Let's bring out my good old favourite from my early times playing the Brits, my 17-pounder. Love this bad boy. I've taken him to tournaments. I don't care. I know 25-pounders are just arguably more efficient in every way in 2nd edition, but I love my 17-pounder, so I very rarely take him to tournaments, but I used to take him quite a lot. Well, a devil may care attitude, let's put it that way. Now, this rule, first of all, let me just say, I'm very surprised. Okay, it's a bit of a backtrack, because they've talked about streamlining the shooting rules as much as possible. So the last thing I expected, I need to apologise. I mean, although I was very polite, I disagreed. I have to hold up my hands and admit I was wrong. Because there's been people in the comment section who've said they've thought in various contexts that certain units might get an advantage to hitting. One person said they think veterans might get a +1 to hit, so they hit on a base of a 3-up. And I said, really don't think that's going to be the case, because they've just spent the first part of the release schedule bigging up how streamlined the shooting rules are, and they've clearly tried to take all the modifiers out of that section of the turn sequence, and yet here they are backtracking on that and throwing in modifiers to hit table, essentially. Because if your anti-tank gun shoots at a tank, or if your vehicle-mounted anti-tank gun shoots at a tank, or another vehicle rather, it gets an immediate +1 to hit. It hits on a base of a 3-up. That's huge. That's absolutely massive. Okay, it also balances out Americans a little bit, because we said this time last week that the US were looking very strong because they can move. They could possibly move and shoot without penalty. Well, now, they're still looking very strong. US tanks, if they're not pinned up and they're veteran, let's say and they've got the gyro. So there's a lot of prerequisites, but if you had 3 Shermans, all veteran, all with gyros, just the cheapest model of Sherman you can get, but veteran with gyro, you can rock around shooting other vehicles on 3-up. That is just like a pack of velociraptors just looking for other tanks to kill, just racing around, don't care about over half range anymore, just popping those shots, hitting on 3-ups, amazing. But talking about hitting on 3-ups, what about your flak 88s? What about your flak 8s? What about your 17 pounders? All right, there's no penalty for shooting over half range. They never really suffered from that, so it actually makes lighter caliber guns come up to their ability. Like one of the massive things, one of the big reasons why I love the 17 pounder, one of the reasons why I love the heavy autocannon over a light autocannon, even though it's the same HE value and stuff. The reason why I like it is because you're always shooting within half range, and if the always shooting within half range is a big deal. Well, now all anti-tank guns specifically, even if mounted on vehicles, get that +1 to hit. I mean, think about Finnish snipers. Think about Finns shooting their rifles at a +1 to hit from Master of the Hunt in the context of 2nd edition. And it's like, wow, these guys just absolutely rinse people. They're just stationary, just like bang, gone. Okay, now it's not as good as Master of the Hunt, because Master of the Hunt obviously can move into ambush. You still get movement and ridiculous shooting. But having a +1 to hit over other units is big. Now, I think anti-tank guns really needed this. They really need this. This is, again, rules, units being brought into the fold. Neglected units going to be part of the scene now, just like machine guns, everything else that we've discussed. Okay? Howitzers always are the belle of the ball. Howitzers always get the limelight because they can kill infantry way better, and they can still stun tanks and even stun out tanks. And if you can take 4 howitzers and just bounce 3 shots off the front of a tank, it's not doing anything. Even if it doesn't run away, it's, from being pinned out, it's got to rally probably a couple of times, all of that. So howitzers can normally stun tanks and kill infantry better. Now, anti-tank guns, there's a reason to take them. You're not just stunning out those tanks, which is often the result with the lighter caliber anti-tank guns anyway. Like, you hit them, it doesn't penetrate. You get 1 pin and you think, light howitzer would have done better than that. So now, they're really viable. Okay. Also, teams, weapon teams, bazookas, Panzerschreck teams, now that they've got that 24-inch range without a penalty, they're really powerful. They can reposition, they can move, they can hop into cars and dart off and fire. We don't know what the rules are for setting up, if they've not changed them, if it's a rule they haven't bothered to change. I don't mean haven't bothered, because of course it looks like they've gone over the rule set with a fine tooth comb. A whole new warlord. But with the if they don't change that, normally you have to take a turn to unpack a gun from its wagon. So you drive on first wave with your truck dragging your 17 pounder. Then you have to use the gun's activation to unpack, and it fires the following turn. But infantry squads don't suffer from that. Well, they're also more manoeuvrable. They can reposition around the board, as we said. So you can actively even hunt enemy vehicles. And you can actually see an example of that in our most recent battle report, where I took 4 bazooka teams for my partisans. Now, so anti-tank guns now have this huge advantage over that. As field guns, they get to hit on a 3-up against tanks. And this is for ambush as well. If we look at the rule specifically, I'll read it out to you again. It says, all anti-tank guns from light to super heavy, including those mounted on vehicles, get an additional +1 modifier to hit vehicles when shooting with the fire order, including ambush and reaction fire. So, if you take a couple of 6-pounders as a Brit, if you take, just a couple of Pack 40s, a couple of Ziz 3s, which is an interesting one if it's a light howitzer that can fire an anti-tank shell. If a light howitzer fires an anti-tank shell in the woods, does anyone hear it fall, kind of thing? But does it get the +1 to pin? Is what I'm trying to say. +1 to hit is what I'm trying to say. So, it makes them really, really, really viable. It's a big buff that they needed. It's kind of not a buff for tanks, in that now tanks, yay, we get a +1 to hit. My tank can hit on a 3-up against other vehicles, such as tanks. So we've been seeing tanks, week after week, 3 weeks in a run, get basically subtly, indirectly through other rules, nerfed and nerfed and nerfed. And we've seen this reflected in the battle reports. Tanks just underperforming, not doing as well as the support units, the heavy units, the infantry, all of that. So we've seen this time and again, and it's, it's getting to the point now where tanks, at least the damage table is going to need a rewrite. Now, I like the damage table. I really hope they don't get to like a degrading tables like they have in 40k. Like, I really don't want to see that. That'll be not 2 thumbs up from me. I'm generally 2 massive thumbs up for all of the changes we've seen so far, but that wouldn't be one for me if we have like degrading unit stats. I'd rather just, I don't mind that indirectly if like gunner gets killed, -1 to get hit or something like that, depending on, or get, so on and so forth, like an Achtung Panzer. But I feel like we're really, and I've said this before from other rules that we've seen, it is pointing towards a rewrite and maybe a more complex vehicle rules where they can take a hit, just like you have now, but maybe increase slightly. So yeah, you can be immobilized. Yeah, you can get turret jammed, all of that kind of thing. I feel like maybe that's all going to be reorganized and rejigged. And the overall outcome will be tanks will be more survivable, because at the moment you've got so many effective anti-tank options. Every single thing that's made for killing tanks, from bazookas to anti-tank guns, everything is getting more powerful, okay? And there's more of them as well. Not only have you got bazookas that don't take a penalty for shooting over 12 inches of range, but also you've got 4 of them if you want. You've got 8 of them if you want. 10 of them if you want. Take your pick. You can just run pure bazookas with a few min-max infantry, if that's what you want to do. Bazooka sniper squad. Now, spam. Now, so just to backtrack slightly, I was surprised by this rule, massively surprised, but I guess they have streamlined the rules enough. They've taken so much away from the hit modifiers that maybe they can include stuff like this. But I'm hoping it doesn't become relatively common. They mentioned further up, there's going to be still plenty of units that have their own individual special rules and flavour. Well, I don't want a lot of those units to start individually in their own way affecting the to-hit table. That would be, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I don't think that would be the case. I think this might be the only one, maybe one more somewhere else, snipers or something like that. But yeah, I can see snipers hitting on 2-ups if they don't move, just ignoring down on cover, just making them basically always hit, for example. But yeah, overall, tanks have taken another blow. The stuff that can target them is getting better. And yes, they get a buff. Yes, they can hit other tanks. They can hit on 3-ups now if they stay still. They can hit on 4-ups if they move and they've not been pinned. But, it's not good for tanks overall. That's a neutral. That's a side grade. And everything else gets an upgrade. The +1 from ambush is interesting because you can just build a little artillery position in the centre or over an objective that you want to hold. That might be vulnerable to armour. Get an officer in there. Get some snap 2 on the go. Bang, bang. 3 anti-tank guns in ambush. Come at me, bro. I'm hitting you on 3-ups with 3 shots. You just literally put your nose around that corner. I'll probably knock you out with the first tank. The first shot. So, as we said, it makes up for the mobility of anti-tank teams. The anti-tank teams get their mobility, and everyone's getting the plus. No one is suffering for over half range anymore, and these guys get a further +1 to hit 3-up to hit baseline. It's massive. It's massive. So yeah, it's really, this is all tying together to make me think that tanks have had, quite a large, if not a complete rewrite in some areas. They've said specifically twice in this article, they've mentioned about preventative measures to stop people just going on the rampage with certain units. So they've said the reason why they've done this explicitly is people can take a lot of tanks now and they don't want tanks to just run rampant. But if tanks stay the same, even before we had this special rule, tanks were getting pushed around, not being able to do what they need to do on our version 2.5 playtesting. So they're not even going to get a look in unless they get an upgrade. So I'm feeling tanks are going to get, armoured vehicles, they're going to get some upgrades here, which makes them more powerful, and therefore this is actually the reaction to that, if that makes sense. This is the counter. They say it explicitly. This is the counter to vehicles being too powerful. We've playtested and seen that vehicles with their current rules are not too powerful. In fact, they're struggling, and therefore, ipso facto, my friends, tanks of Defo had not Defo, but tanks, we can be confident, have had a rewrite, and there's going to be some big buffs to them. It's going to, when we see the tank rules drop now, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, what is going on once again, which is great. I can't wait. And the engineering thing, they mentioned that, we've explicitly made it so you can't just spam engineers and take an engineering platoon, okay? You can, or an engineering company, if that makes sense. You've got to take rifle platoons and engineering platoons attached to them. So again, we know engineers are going to be powerful, and we can suggest that the building rules, it's the same kind of logic is following through this video, same theme emerging for the more we find out about it. And it's just really nice once again to see, as we've said in previous videos, Warlord approaching this with nuance and streamlining. That's what we want to see. That's what we want to see. We want to see a game that's fun, streamlined, easy to play, but that allows for massive amounts of tactical nuance, and it allows it's easy to learn, difficult to master, if that makes sense. You've got a high skill ceiling, because that's what makes things fun. Then you're always learning every game, always cool, always having new experiences when you try new units out. Now, I do realise I've been merging the rules deep dive, the devil in the detail section, with the general rules description here, but it's just so exciting. My mind is genuinely blown, and ideas just coming to the forth in my mind as we're going through and I'm discussing the rules. So, one thing that I want to mention before I go any further and forget and lose track of what I've said, essentially, guys, is that we know the combat rules have changed. They've slipped that in there in between the screen grabs of the rules from the rule book. They've mentioned that the engineering rules are part of a larger overhaul of the combat rules, which is very interesting. Now, I like the combat rules. Now, if they change them, whatever. It's quite brutal, and one bad dice roll can lose you a game. So it could be improved. I can certainly see ways they can improve the combat roll. So I'm not against them changing the combat rolls. What I really don't want them to see is random charge distances. Please, please do not give us random charge distances. We don't have pre-measuring. The skill comes in guessing if you are that set range. And I want pre-measuring, and we know we've got pre-measuring. We know we've got that because we've seen the shooting sequence, and you declare target before you measure range to it. Okay? So we know we've no pre-measuring. If you give us pre-measuring and random charge distances, it's going to be very difficult to do charges. It's really going to be an unknown. You're just going to be wildly stabbing in the dark there. So let's not see that. But yeah, we know, just wanted to shine a spotlight on that for you guys, that there are going to be a quite large overhaul of the combat rules. Now we'll move on again to a further deep dive. Let's swim out further into the ocean of this new anti-tank field gun rule. Now, first things first, coaxial machine guns. Not really even mega worth it anymore, if you think about it. They're hitting less accurately than your main gun. So if you've got a turreted tank, you're going to be popping that field gun most of the time. We've already seen that in our battle reports. Less and less reason to shoot the coaxial. Yeah, you shoot your whole mounted, sling a pin out there, of course, why not? But when you want to do damage even against infantry, you're using that anti-tank gun. So let's just take a step back for a second on the whole anti-tank gun thing. Let's look at how this is playing out. They're looking really good. they've got a max of a -1 to hit for being pinned if you don't take them inexperienced. So a regular field gun, if it gets pinned, even if you pin it up 2-3 pins, it's max -1 to hit. So if you're shooting at a tank, it's hitting on a 4 up, even with like 5 pins. Okay, it's not moving and shooting, so that's not a problem. And if you take it inexperienced, that's your own fault for taking that modifier. But at the end of the day, that's even viable. Like taking batteries of inexperienced anti-tank guns isn't the end of the world. If that comes with a big old discount and you can just take 4 inexperienced anti-tank guns and you maybe take another selector for your other support weapons and so on and so forth, essentially that's really cheap, and they're hitting on the 4 up that everyone else is hitting on anyway. So inexperienced field guns, totally viable, but regular field guns, incredibly viable. Veteran field guns, viable because they're very hard to shift. You've got to kill them off. You can't just pin them out. You've got to kill them. So the veterancy, worth the points. Inexperienced, still effective. Regular, still effective. Take your pick. It's all good. Okay? They're not going to suffer the exceptional damage from HE. That we know. Could that be the rule for HE? That it gets to re-roll the 6s and sees if it gets exceptional damage. That could be it. So when we put all of this together, let's take a look at the Flak 88, for example. If it's not pinned, it's hitting you on a 3 up. Nothing you can do about that. Doesn't matter if you're in cover. You're going to need those 2 up cover saves down in hard cover. Let's put it that way. Not only that, you pin it as much as you like, it's hitting you on a 4 up, 50-50. Let's say they've got a couple of them. You're taking a flak round every single turn against a vehicle. Okay, you are losing a vehicle a turn, essentially, translation. On top of that, Flag 88's got 7 crew, is it? 6 or 7 crew. And until you get it down to the last man, until you wipe it out potentially, we don't know that there's any loader penalties. We haven't seen loader penalties as a negative to modify it, to hit anymore. In fact, we explicitly haven't seen it when we've had those rules released and it's not been mentioned. So, that Flak 88, if you've got a couple of Flak 88s, you are having to do 12 to 14 wounds off the top of my head to those Flak 88s, and the whole time until you achieve that, they're going, hitting you on a 4 up, hitting you on a 4 up, hitting you on a 4 up, hitting you on a 4 up. Like, mortar platoons look very necessary. You're going to need to slam those heavy field guns with high explosive. There's no other way around it. Okay? You take a couple of veteran field guns with big crews, and you can knock out any vehicle in the game basically on a whim. So the big field guns, I see them being very, very powerful. The little field guns, you know, the same again. Quantity has a quality of its own. You take multiple inexperienced field guns, multiple regular light anti-tank guns. Still got that 48-inch range, still creating a really nice zone of exclusion, one might say. One thing I might mention is that recce vehicles still looking for that buff yet. They can back out of trouble. However, it's clear from the rules that it's from a fire order. So these guys, if they want to sneak out from behind a building, behind a bit of obscuring terrain, and fire that shot off, even if it's at a vehicle, they're going to be hitting on a 5 up because they've had an advance order. So, moving and shooting, even against vehicles, is going to suffer quite a large penalty there. That also does affect the American vehicles. It doesn't make them absolutely unhinged, because if they give them an advance order, they're not going to get the +1 to hit. They've got to be stationary. Dance with recce is going to be really cool. And considering there's whole recce platoons, that's going to be an interesting set of interactions. If you've got anti-tank weaponry hitting on a 3-up, but you've got armoured transports in a recce platoon able to recce your way potentially even closer to your lines but out of line of sight. Who knows? But yeah, headline, field guns hitting on a 3-up or a 4-up if you pin them, and that's it. Doesn't matter big or small. That is a lot of incoming accurate fire against vehicles. That is the caveat though, against vehicles. Okay? So if you shoot your high explosive shot at a squad of veterans, you're still only hitting on a 4-up. But it makes that question of do you take howitzers, anti-tank guns, or a mix of both? It's definitely an interesting question, because the howitzers are gonna, they're not gonna. I don't see them hitting infantry more accurately than anti-tank. I don't see them getting an equivalent rule. I think this is there to make, as we've said, so the big takeaway as more and more of Warlord's sort of ethos becomes clear to us in the design of 3rd edition version 3. We're seeing now clearly they're bringing units into the fold. So they're bringing those anti-tank guns up to speed with the howitzers. Howitzers, still hitting really nicely. Still hitting on a 4-up, a 5-up if you pinned. But not as good as a 3-up, 4-up, let's put it that way. Not at all. One final thing I might mention before we get onto your guys' comments is, howitzer tanks now, howitzer vehicles. They're, as far as we can tell, not getting this buff unless the anti-tank gun rule is given to some howitzers. Maybe if they have a dual shell, they get given that rule. Maybe that's how the Ziz 3 will work and stuff like that. They just get that unit special rule instead of, they've got a special shell and Look, they just get the anti-tank gun rule. Now that's enough waffle from me. Let's hear what you guys have to say. So we'll go through the comments from the video on shooting rules last week. And of course, whilst we're all here, let's set a meeting for this time next week. We'll reconvene. We'll discuss the progress and the new rules as we go. So, Hippie Shakespeare says that they expect the national rules to be scaled down, perhaps even to be dropped entirely. There was always a point of contention and unbalanced, taking no account of the size of the game being played, which is really true. If you're playing a starter game, 500 points, and you're playing against the Brits or the Soviets, their national rules are really, really, really going to come into play there. It's just an auto win. The US seems obviously broken now for the reasons we pointed out, such as being able to move and shoot, being able to take 6-shot HMG heavy weapon teams and just spam them in platoons. People have responded to this though. It's triggered a whole discussion, which is great. This is what we want to see. So Connor DeBoss says that he hopes not. It makes the armies feel different. I agree with you there, Connor. I hope the national rules are still in place. I think maybe special rules will be... Two Slugger says, I think maybe special rules will be given to officers and their experience rank. I play Italian and seen more specials added to officers from Tough Guts than more recent case Blue Belt. That's a really good point. You've also got like Romanians, I think Hungarians, something like that. They have special rules for their officers. And we haven't had any revealed right now, but it's an interesting point to think about this week. And Keith Slawinski says he thinks we should have both. 1 to 2 simple army-wide rules and specific platoon rules that generally only benefit the units specific to that platoon. Now, I fully get what you're saying there, Keith, and I haven't finished reading your comment. I'm just reading this live. But I don't like formation. I like formations for me in like 7th edition and so on and so forth in 40k, I think it was. Formations just really ruined each edition that it came into. Every time formations cropped up, I didn't massively appreciate that. So I'm hoping they don't have national rules for individual platoons. I don't think that's what you're saying, but that's just made me think that right now off the bat. I hope that's not the case. I hope it's not like, Brit rifle platoons get this, whereas German rifle platoons get this. and French artillery platoons get this, whereas so on and so forth. Let's hope that's not, well, I hope that's not the case. That's going to just muddy the waters. Now, he goes on, he gives an example of what he's getting at. He says, for example, I like having Hitler's buzzsaw as an army special rule, as it would be thematic, nonsensical to apply it to a single platoon and difficult to track. However, I think it makes total sense to attach abilities like Tiger Fear or forward the guns to specific armoured platoons, which might change depending on your armoured platoon theatre selector. So an early war armoured platoon selector might not have Tiger Fear, as there was no Tiger. So that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Like, you know, because that's something that comes to mind. Like, you wouldn't attach it to platoons because you'd have platoons causing Tiger Fear that when Tigers don't exist. But who knows? Now, he goes on to say, a good example of this working could be the Soviets. You want a great patriotic war, so the quantity of free and experienced squad for the generic rifle platoon. So he's sort of said a mix of both here. Now, I don't mind specific platoons having specific rules by any means. I don't want, as I've said, specific nations to have specific platoons with specific rules. I think army-wide for me. Army-wide, national rules, and then platoon-specific rules here and there for a bit of flavour, perhaps. We'll move on. Vampius 4849 says that they think they didn't show all of the hit modifiers. There might be +1 for vets. This is what I was mentioning earlier. This really stood out to me, Vampius. Snipers getting +1 as well, and I really agree with you on that. I think that, and now that we've seen anti-tank guns get a +1, I think, you know, the omens are pointing that way, Vampius, for sure. Not necessarily for vets. I think snipers certainly are going to get a +1 to hit. Well, as certain as we can be in these chaotic times. Now, Keith Slawinski's back with another comment. And he says he's happy with the half-distance general rule is gone. It might become a special rule for specific weapons or armies, which is true. And the move shoot, he agrees with me that the move shoot bonus is insane for US. You know, so few shooting modifiers now. The US, you know, basically just never suffering a modifier if they take anti-tank guns and riflemen. In fact, only benefits. Now, he says he knows it sounds odd to remove that feature and then put it back on US troops, but it'd still be a simplification of the overall rules for every other army. And I agree with him there as well. But yeah, there's only 1 or 2 negative to hit for modifiers in the game. The US are either going to, and he finishes off by saying that the US either has to change or go way up in points across the board, like maybe more points for infantry, just as a general rule. Now, just scrolling past a few very kind comments, just nice feedback, thank you guys. And then we'll go on to Morticrow. Now, Morticrow says that small teams being removed is a godsend. Not a big fan of the cover saves, but I'm hoping the cover rules are more forgiving. Not having a rage penalty is huge for MMG since the range has been increased. And that's bang on as well. Your prediction came correct, because when we play tested with our updated bolt action 2.5.3 on the Sunday game, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, machine guns just absolutely popping now. Now, one of our esteemed members, Arkai KM, just corrects this guy. Says it's 36-inch range still, and as far as I'm aware, that is the case. But it increases their effective range for sure. Now, Claire W9753, I love this comment. It says that Finns seem like they should be incredibly happy with these changes. No longer having the long range penalties on rifles will make those ambushes that much more deadly. Yeah, just basically Finns, if they've still got master of the hunt, they can't really get the 2-ups now, but they're always going to be hitting on 3-ups basically, which is just great. Oh, I literally can't wait to do that. Now, Evan Bates responds here. Oh no, he says interesting comment. Not something I've really considered, but he says, I hope we see the death of straight hit values on indirect fire, such as mortars. And he's obviously a player of Gates of Antares. He says, I hope we see the scatter mechanic that's used in Gates of Antares. Now, scatter mechanics, old school 40k, they're very fun. Not against them. But I do like zeroing in. I do like it. I'd be tempted to say measure from this. If that was the case, the way I do it, and we'll have to see, this is on the fly speculation, is I'd say roll a d6. It's that many inches from the center of the unit on the first roll. Then it's a d3. Then it's a d2. Then it hits the center of the unit or something like that. So you can actually hit a couple of guys here and there, but not place the template optimally or something like that, and you're just placing it that far from the center of the unit, if that's the way you want to do things. Now, Violet Moon Media, they've been commenting every video. Really appreciate it. Really enjoying the conversation with Violet Moon Media here. And you guys get involved as well. Everyone get involved in the conversation, because it's just great to hear the community's thoughts. And they agree with what I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, and it's all coming together nicely. They say this: okay, I was wrong regarding the cover saves being 6 and 5 up, and you guys were right in the last week's battle report. But things are getting interesting, and I agree with you. And I felt the same as you, that after we played the battle report the week before, not the most recent one, that the 4-5 was too strong, and it was 5-6, so to speak. But yeah, I think we can see now why that is the case. Even more so, it's become clear. With all these anti-tank guns popping off, you're going to need those 4 at 5 up cover saves, especially for your tanks. If your vehicles don't have cover, they're going to get punished. So that's why it's clear now. You've got to have that 4-5 cover save. Looks like it's going to be more of a fire and manoeuvre skirmish game, with units moving from cover to cover under the protection of suppressive fire, keeping the enemy pinned. Could not agree more. That's how our games have been evolving over the past few weeks. That's how I've been playing it, and yeah, more and more, the more units we try, more rules that come out, the more formations we try, the more we play test and adjust bolt action 2.5, the clearer it becomes, but the more fire and manoeuvre it becomes. It's almost like you've got your little tank platoons, your vehicle platoons doing one thing, you've got your recce platoon, they've got their mission objective. Your different platoons almost have different missions, can do different things, work independently, but they can also work in combination with your infantry moving up under the fire support of howitzers, from artillery platoons and machine guns, mortar fire and so on, suppressing enemy positions. So yeah, it's becoming like different unit types specifically have different jobs, and it all, when it works together, it sings. When it's in harmony, it's in harmony. Now, they go on to just sort of clarify a few things with what a couple of other people have said, and they finish off by saying, and JP, US Army, 1250 points. If they stay the same, you get 14 flamethrowers, but they'll have to walk. Now, don't be saying stuff like that on the channel. I don't need JP. If JP learns to read, and he reads that comment, I am in big trouble. Don't be suggesting 14 flamethrowers to him. Now, Dario's Tabletop Miniatures, just bigging up the channel as always. He's one of our venerable channel members, and really appreciate the support, bro. It makes a big difference to us, just getting those paints, getting that scenery done, so we can just keep things fresh on the channel, always updating, being more creative. Now we've got these tabletop specials. They've not given us anything specific on the optional special rules. They've not clarified anything at all, but what they've said is basically you'll be able to create any narrative or theatre that you could possibly come up with, so that's going to be cool. Now, Dario, he says that he used to get stomped by his local bolt action playgroup, but then he found our Stug Life video, restored his morale, and he started taking scalps with the Stug, even though everyone was calling it trash. Love hearing that, Dario. Stug Life, brother. Then he talks about how he's improved over time. He's experienced different battles, different forces, double barbecue, enemy panzers, all of this kind of thing. Now he says he feels with our series on Bolt Action 2.5, these intelligence briefings, the 2 videos we're putting out a week. If you're not subscribed, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. We're putting out 2 videos a week in the lead up to version 3. And we're bringing out a week of videos when version 3 comes out. So you can just watch that content and just let the information infuse in. But this is the Scholar Progenium here. Okay, this is what we do on this channel. We're all about learning. We're all about making your game better and putting out those cool, interesting and entertaining battle reports for you guys every week. So, and he's just saying it's a testament to that. He feels almost ready for version 3. But we've still got more to learn, my friend. More exciting new information to come, I'm sure. Now, interesting, we'll have a couple more comments. We've got tons of comments. You guys really appreciate it. I cannot thank the community, you guys, enough. You're liking the videos, sharing them, commenting, discussing with each other. Everyone's been super polite. It's just so fascinating. You guys are pointing out things to me that I've missed in my reaction videos. It's just absolutely great. So I can't thank you enough. But the other side of that is I'm going to miss some comments out there. I'm not going to be able to cover everyone because there's a lot to go through. So just a couple more, but we'll say Merlin 4084 because he has had something very interesting to say. He says, while I hesitate to say that it's strong, I feel these changes sort of make inexperienced squads a bit more viable. And he's talking about the shooting rules. I think they'll stay 3 up to kill, so they won't be really strong, but I can see them as being decent units to hold ground with. Like with his French or Dutch, I feel like a rifle platoon made up of inexperienced infantry could hold a flank much better and potentially push if they have a major to boost their morale. However, he mentions in brackets that he thinks that the higher officers need a drastic reduction of points to make that appealing. We'll see, because we don't know what Snap 2 and all of that, how that's going to work. But yeah, right now, no one's taking them. Absolutely agree, 100%. But yeah, now that inexperienced, they still suffer that -1 for being inexperienced, but because they're not completely hamstrung with pins, they might actually be effective. And he goes on this is why I'm mentioning this comment, because it's a very, you've predicted something here. He said, he goes on, old Merlin, very wise Merlin, goes on to say, I don't see it being done very often, but I could see a case for some artillery to be taken inexperienced as well, especially ones with gun shields, since the base to hit will always be a 5 now. Oh, it was even better than that, my friend, way better than that. You have a much better chance of hitting anything on the table than you would have in version 2. Sure, you might not cause many wounds, especially if the target goes down, but it is much better art. I think heavy artillery would benefit the most, as I suspect HE will ignore cover save, so at least the penetration value of the weapon will reduce the cover save, and a lot of people have been saying that's all over the comment section. Food for thought anyway, and he likes the changes in general. Now, yeah, it's way bigger than that, my friend. Now, you're hitting on a 3-up base with those anti-tank guns. Inexperienced light anti-tank gun spam at 40 points a unit. Just take 2 squads of riflemen. The second one can be super cheap, just 5 inexperienced Strath battalion and an inexperienced officer, something equivalent to that. But then you've got your 2 rifle platoons, so you can basically do whatever the heck you like. Okay? Take a just battery of 4 light anti-tank guns, inexperienced, because you're hitting on 4s, 5s if you're pinned. You're landing some shots every turn. You're knocking out those trucks. You're knocking out those, Hanamags. Hanamags don't get something now. They are literally dead now. We've said it before. They were dead in 1st edition. They were dead in 2nd edition. And now in 3rd edition, with the reduction in their shots, with this now, blooming heck, if you don't have a couple of light anti-tank guns, inexperienced in every army, to just pop those shots easy. Or, you don't have to. Obviously, I'd love to see what the autocannon rules are. Obviously, autocannon's going to have their own rules, just like HE. Can't wait to see those. Okay, everything's looking tasty. Autocannons aren't that commonly used. Can't see howitzers getting a massive buff. I can see everything being brought into line with HE. We've definitely seen anti-tank guns now. 100% this brings them into line with HE. Who doesn't like landing more shots? That's the name of the game. Take more units, hit better with those units, land more shots. Just absolutely mind-blowing. I could waffle on for days about this. But Merlin, my friend, your prediction is the worst case scenario for inexperienced units. The worst case. Regular, it's not even that expensive to spam regular light anti-tank guns. And a couple of very heavy shells that are going to delete any heavy tanks that might be a nuisance. And then they can still launch out. Okay, they're not hitting on a 3 at base. But this 17-pounder here, for King George, he can sling out a 3-inch template, as far as we're aware. He can deal with anything. But now, it doesn't matter what unit he looks at. If he gets that hit, the big guns are of the case where generally, if things are equivalent to second edition, the problem has always been landing the hit. Now that they can't be pinned out, you're going to land that hit. Now that there's no penalty for being over half range, there's no escape. You're going to land that hit anywhere on the board. Okay, it's crazy. Artillery sections, man. You got to have a couple of your field guns, a couple of big boys, a couple of little boys, a couple of howitzers thrown in there. I'm afraid of multiple launch rocket systems. I feel like they've got to be nerfed because you can't take 4 of those. But now I'm thinking, well, everything else is so good. You're not going to want to spam 8 Nebelwerfers. You'll spam only 4 Nebelwerfers, and then you'll take 4 flak 88s. That's obviously the logical conclusion to this this intelligence briefing, of course. I think that's it's the only conclusion that can really be drawn from this. But I don't know if you can hear that, but the dog's barking. I've been waffling on this is the longest intelligence briefing reaction video by a long way. So we'll wrap it up there, boys. But I hope you found this video interesting and entertaining. Make sure you like the video if you've enjoyed it. It really helps the channel out. And if you're following on with all these intelligence briefings and you want to help us get prepped to bring you the best content that we possibly can in version 3 for release, then consider becoming a member. There's only great things ahead for this channel. Thanks for all of your support and all of our new members that have joined in recent weeks. So, with that being said, I hope you found this video interesting and entertaining. This has been the Scholar Progenium. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.